You know, we often talk about Montreal as the city defined by its foundational French and English history.
Right, the two solitudes.
Exactly. And it's constantly being reshaped by these fresh waves of immigration. But there's this surprising fact lurking in the sources you shared.
Hmm.
One of the city's most influential, vibrant, and this is the key part, oldest non-European immigrant communities has roots that stretch all the way back to the late 19th century.
It's an incredible contrast, isn't it?
It is. We are talking about the Levantine community, so primarily people of Lebanese, Syrian, and Egyptian descent.
It is a fantastic contrast.
Hmm.
I mean, you have so many communities that only arrived in really significant numbers after the 1980s.
Right.
But this group, they were laying down deep commercial and cultural groundwork long before World War II.
Right.
And our sources really highlight that duality. These deep historical roots right alongside continuous recent migration, all driven by crisis and commerce.
Exactly, and that's our mission in this deep dive. We're going to explore the sources you provided to understand the astonishing evolution of this community.
Yeah.
We're going to focus on two things that it seems truly define them: their exceptional entrepreneurial spirit and the profound physical impact they've had on shaping Montreal's economic and urban landscape.
And the sheer scale of it makes them impossible to ignore.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about one of the largest Lebanese diasporas per capita in all of North America.
Wow.
The estimates are between 75,000 and 90,000 people of Lebanese origin alone. Then you add another maybe 30,000 Syrians and Egyptians.
So if you're traveling through Montreal, their presence is most visibly concentrated in the borough of Saint Laurent and increasingly in Laval.
That's right.
So if you live, work, or shop in Greater Montreal, you need to understand this deep dive. The story of this community is the story of how large swaths of the city were literally built and nourished. But to get there, we absolutely have to start with the history. You noted that the flow of migrants seems to follow four distinct waves, almost always tied to political and economic upheaval back home.
That's the unifying theme, really. The initial push factors, whether it's Ottoman instability or Egyptian nationalization or the Lebanese civil war, that created the necessity for migration.
Okay.
But the pull factors, Montreal's commercial opportunities, that's what created this success story.
Let's start at the very beginning then. The true pioneers. Wave 1, stretching from about 1890 to 1940. Who were these first arrivals?
This initial group was overwhelmingly Christian Maronites, Melkites, and they were fleeing the waning influence and, frankly, the growing instability of the Ottoman Empire.
And what's crucial to understand about them?
They often had established trade connections back home, and they brought that commercial aptitude with them.
So they weren't coming here to look for factory jobs or something like that. They were, in a way, instant entrepreneurs.
Precisely. They arrived primarily as merchants and famously as peddlers. They didn't need huge amounts of capital to start. They just used their existing networks and very rapidly integrated through commerce.
And where did they settle?
Mostly around Ville Marie and the southern plateau Mont Royal, establishing that foundational commercial groundwork we talked about.
That rapid integration through commerce is fascinating. Then, after a bit of a lull, we see a shift in the 1960s and 70s with Wave 2, which was focused on Egyptian migration. What was the driving force there?
The sources point directly to political instability and the nationalizations under Nasser in Egypt. This economic and political shift triggered a significant arrival of the Coptic community.
The indigenous Christians of Egypt?
That's right. So again, you see a Christian group moving because of political pressure.
And where did they go? They weren't settling in the Central Plateau with the pioneers from Wave 1?
No, they began the move outwards. They focused on Saint Laurent and Pierrefonds-Roxborough, and this shift into the burgeoning suburban areas in the 60s and 70s was so key.
Why is that?
Because it set the stage for the massive concentrations of the community we see in Saint Laurent today. They were, in a sense, the first wave of Levantine suburban pioneers.
Which brings us to the moment that fundamentally changed the city's demographic and its economic structure. Wave 3, the massive Lebanese exodus triggered by the Civil War from roughly 1975 to 1990.
And this wasn't just another influx of migrants. This was a transfer of entire families, of established entrepreneurs and substantial capital fleeing one of the longest, most brutal civil conflicts of the 20th century.
A lot of the business leaders we recognize today, they arrived during that 15-year window.
Absolutely.
I wonder, did the sources mention if that influx of, significant capital and established business people from Wave 3 caused any friction for the smaller, earlier pioneers from Wave 1 who had been working hard for generations?
That's a very perceptive question. And while the sources don't detail any, let's say, open conflict, they show a clear economic inflection point. The newer, larger wave simply had more capital, which rapidly scaled up the existing commercial activity. The sources actually identify this period as the undisputed golden age of textiles for the community in Montreal.
A boom enabled by that sudden capital transfer.
Precisely.
And that movement didn't just populate existing areas, it literally built new neighborhoods. It was this density that led to the borough of Saint-Laurent earning that affectionate nickname, Ville Saint-Liban, in the 1990s.
It tells you everything you need to know about the impact. It wasn't just a concentration. The community fundamentally shaped the local political, social, and economic fabric of Saint-Laurent.
Making it a hub that continues to attract new waves.
Exactly. Which brings us to the present. Wave 4, the Syrian arrivals, ongoing since about 2015.
And this is different again.
This is a humanitarian crisis response. It involves the reception of state and privately sponsored refugees fleeing the war in Syria. They're settling in established Levantine strongholds like Laval and Hansa-Cartierville, but also integrating into areas like Villeray, which continues to add to the community's diversity.
So we have this incredible continuous stream, driven first by commerce, then political shifts, and finally by humanitarian crisis, all spanning well over a century. That historical foundation is just essential, because those early waves built the platform for the second major theme we need to explore, the exceptional entrepreneurial engine of this community.
And this is where the mechanism of their success becomes so clear. The community successfully transitioned from being peddlers and manufacturers to managing major global brands and critically redefining urban space through real estate.
It's a stunning evolution in economic power in just over 100 years.
It really is.
Let's start with the industry that defined Wave 3, textiles and fashion. Our sources describe how Lebanese and Syrians became the absolute driving forces of Chabanel. For listeners who might not be familiar with Montreal, Chabanel is historically the heart of the city's fashion district.
They dominated it, manufacturing, importing, distribution, the whole thing. The key skill they leveraged was their expertise in international trade and sourcing, a skill they had honed for decades in the Levant.
So they applied an existing global network to a new context.
Perfectly. They applied it to the complex supply chains of the modern apparel industry.
And that's how a company like Gildan Activewear just takes off. The Chamandi family, who founded Gildan, they transformed a children's clothing business into this publicly traded global leader in basic apparel.
Exactly. They scaled their existing family know-how using sophisticated global supply chain management. The influence hasn't faded, it's just moved up the value chain.
What do you mean by that?
Well, today, members of the community had several headquarters of international brands right here in Montreal. That textile money, it created the first massive layer of wealth.
And where did that wealth go?
It flowed straight into real estate and urban development. This is where you see the most physical, the most tangible transformation of the Greater Montreal area, Laval, Brossard, town of Mount Royal, all driven by major developers from this community.
And the sources highlight Andrew Letfy as a prime example of this transition.
He's the perfect example. He's the CEO of Groupe Dynamite, which is a huge retail force. But his real impact comes as the leader of Carbonleo.
Right, the developer.
He's the architect behind these massive city-defining projects like Cartier DIX 30 on the South Shore and the really ambitious Royal Mount mega project in Mount Royal.
He is fundamentally changing not just where you shop, but how entire communities are organized, how transportation flows. I mean, these aren't just strip malls.
No, they're new urban centers. They require huge risk assessment, large-scale capital, and a deep understanding of Quebec's unique market. The fact that this community is behind these kinds of transformative projects, it just speaks volumes.
But perhaps the most accessible and certainly the most delicious impact is in retail and food. This is where the cultural contribution is so palpable.
Absolutely. The democratization of Middle Eastern flavors in Quebec is directly attributable to these entrepreneurs. I mean, we're talking about the Chi brothers, Elie and Jamil, the founders of the Adonis Group.
They started as just a small local grocery store.
A tiny store serving the community. But they figured out how to scale international offerings perfectly.
They didn't just make Lebanese food available. They taught Quebec to love ingredients like za'atar and specific spices.
For sure. And when a retail giant like Metro takes a majority stake, It signals that Adonis is no longer just a niche market. It's an essential part of the general Quebec food scene.
It's a stamp of mainstream economic approval.
Right. And while Adonis is the giant in retail, the sources also point to other powerful culinary institutions that solidify that cultural presence. You have the popular Bustan Lebanese chain.
So everywhere.
And then high-end dining spots like Restaurant Damas, which brings this refined Syrian cuisine to the forefront. They are all part of that same economic engine.
So we've tracked the history through 4 waves and the economic engine they built. To really complete the picture of integration, we need to look at the cultural and civic influence this community has had, from the arts all the way to the highest levels of city and provincial government.
And this is where we see their ability to operate successfully in both of Montreal's spheres, the Anglophone and Francophone worlds, while maintaining these strong cultural anchors.
You can even see it in the architecture.
You can. Religious landmarks like the massive St. Maron Cathedral, it serves as a major architectural and social landmark, providing structure and identity for the Maronite community.
And it goes beyond faith. They're dedicated cultural institutions like the Lebanese Canadian Community Center, the Syrian Community Center in Montreal.
They provide continuity and support. Plus, they share that culture publicly, most notably through the annual Montreal Lebanese Festival, which attracts thousands of people to celebrate the food and the folklore.
And their creative and artistic radiance is truly global, which just proves how deeply integrated they are into the cultural production of Quebec.
Absolutely. Think about the arts. Wajdi Mouawad, the renowned playwright and director, author of the international success Incendies.
A masterpiece.
His work often integrates themes of diaspora and conflict, and it resonates globally while being produced squarely within the Francophone cultural machine.
That's a perfect example of integration. And in film, we have Avier Dolan, the celebrated filmmaker, who has Lebanese origins on his father's side.
The music scene spans genres, too. You have Kemaro and Masari in pop, the soprano Joyce El Khoury in classical music, and even Patrick Gamel, P-Thug from the electro-funk duo Chromeo. The talent is so diverse and deeply established.
And that deep integration extends directly into politics, covering the full spectrum. This community has translated its economic density into real civic influence.
It really has.
We see substantial representation at the municipal level, which is often the best indicator of local power. Aref Salem, for instance, he's currently the leader of the official opposition at City Hall for Ensemble Montreal.
And Ali Haddad serves as a city councillor in Ahuntsic-Cartierville.
And provincially, you have figures like Ruba Ghazal, the MNA for Mercier for Quebec Solidaire. Though she's of Palestinian origin, she was born in Lebanon and represents the progressive left-wing flank of Quebec politics.
Federally, too. We see Faiz El Khoury, who the MP for Laval-Les-Els, and Patricia Latanzio, MP for Saint-Léonard-Saint-Michel, who is of Italian and Lebanese descent.
That breadth of representation is so significant. They are fully participating in the political structures, covering Anglophone and Francophone constituencies, spanning federal, provincial, and municipal governments.
And beyond politics and the arts, we should quickly acknowledge the heavy hitters across industry and academia.
For sure.
Beyond the Chimandis in apparel, you have Charles Caboth, a major entrepreneur in hospitality and entertainment with INK Entertainment. And in academia, the sources cite Gad Saad, the prominent professor of marketing at Concordia University. The talent pool really covers every sphere of influence.
So if we synthesize this entire deep dive, what's the single biggest takeaway for our listener?
It's a story of remarkable resilience and profound economic mastery. This community, beginning as Christian pioneers fleeing the Ottoman Empire and swelling dramatically when entrepreneurs and refugees fled the Civil War, they didn't just survive, they thrived. They achieved this seamless integration into both the city's Anglophone and Francophone economic and political spheres, all while steadfastly maintaining their cultural vitality.
They didn't just adapt to Montreal, they actively built huge parts of it. They went from being peddlers selling dry goods on the plateau to being the architects of city-shaping mega-projects and the founders of global apparel empires.
That level of entrepreneurial mobility is what makes their story so unique. And the sources show that while the community was originally, denominationally specific, Maronite, Melkite, Coptic, the continuous migration,
home waves,
especially the more recent arrivals from Syria and Egypt, it means the community is now far more diverse, reflecting all facets of the Levantine region.
That deep, complex dynamism, it really raises an important question for you, the listener, to mull over. We've seen how the early Maronite pioneers built the base, and the Civil War refugees built the economy. So how will the continued blending of these old established migration waves with the new ones, including a new generation of Syrian and other Levantine arrivals, how will that shape the future cultural and political identity of Ville Saint-Liban of Saint Laurent over the next 2 decades?
Will that blend create a new definition of what it means to be a Levantine Montrealer?
It's a story that is clearly still being written.